Chapter 22 August 1974, Islamabad. I want to bring Marion and Harry back to America as soon as possible, John said, leaning over the desk. Walter didn't answer but only threw him a sharp glance and continued sorting through stacks of files. John stared at his inscrutable profile, thinking how much he disliked Walter's bureaucratic reserve. Even his narrow shoulders gave him the impression of stiffness, snobbishness almost. The firm set of his thin, tight lips suggested a dominant personality that was used to having its way. John looked around the spare office, desperate to find some point of connection, any common ground with this incomprehensible man. The few photos were all of official-looking men in formal poses, not a single one of a wife or a child. Obviously, family was not a priority in Walter's life. John doubted he felt any emotion beyond grim satisfaction with a job well done. But he had to ask, "Could you please help me with the paperwork? You can have Marion's papers tomorrow. I'll see to it personally." "What about Harry?" Walter folded his hands on the desk with a sigh. "We've been through this already, John. The Islamabad police are investigating the incident and Harry's circumstances. They want to retain the body until they close the case." "How long will that take?" "Hard to predict." "Why? You've told me nothing. I need some answers, you prick." John's palm slammed the desk to punctuate his question. Walter raised his eyes, impenetrable as always, to consider John's outburst. "All right, I'll tell you as much as I can. The families of the two Pakistanis who died in the accident are taking legal action against the embassy for wrongful death caused by a U.S. citizen. In addition, Pakistani authorities have evidence, including witnesses, who have accused Harry of certain crimes. We are working on these issues, trying to resolve them quietly and with a minimum of fuss. You have to be patient with the official channels." "Can't we use diplomatic immunity to force them to release the body?" His movements slow and methodical, Walter opened his desk drawer and took a glass and a bottle of whiskey out of the bottom drawer. His smile seemed pasted on his face. "Here, have a little something to relax yourself, calm your nerves." "No, thank you." John stood up and paced around the small office. He distrusted anyone who drank alcohol at work. Walter shrugged and poured a generous glassful, smiling as he took a long swallow, his eyes never leaving John. Obviously, he enjoyed his job, John thought. CIA station master at the U.S. Embassy, his little empire, with loads of freedom and virtually no oversight. He came here under a tourist visa, not a diplomatic one, Walter observed blandly. John said firmly, "There has to be some way to sort this out. I'm not leaving him behind." Walter could hear the barely suppressed enmity in John's voice. "I understand your pain, but here's my advice. Take Marion with you and leave Pakistan now. Trust me, there's nothing you can do for Harry." "No, I'm staying until I get Harry back. I'm the last person who spoke with him. I can prove that his death was not an accident." Walter set the glass down with a thump, pulled a thick file out of his desk, and threw it in front of John. Papers and photos slid across the smooth surface, and John's throat constricted with a fresh wave of grief. Shuffling through numerous pictures of the dreadful accident, Walter picked out a few photos, shoving them across the desk toward John. They showed a grinning Harry, his arms around several young Pakistani boys. John studied them, his hands shaking with rage. "What's all this?" "The police are charging Harry with seducing local boys. Both prostitution and immoral sexual behavior are crimes in Pakistan. John threw the photos back at Walter. This is total crap, and you and I both know it. Just like we both know who killed him and why they wanted him dead. The Pakistani government is trying to cover their ass. They set this shit up to blackmail him, to discredit him so we can't use the information he learned to stop their clandestine nuclear activity. His fist slammed against the desk again, rattling the glass. We can't let them throw dirt on him. We can't allow them to use this lie as coercion against the American non-proliferation policy. Walter could see John was close to breaking point. He held his palm out and then picked up the glass and methodically wiped up the spilled liquid with a napkin. He said slowly and distinctly, "We have no evidence that can clear his name." We do have evidence, but you have to get out of your office and use the influence of the embassy. Walter sneered. You expect me to mobilize all my people here for one insignificant tourist? You're insane. The US Embassy does important work in Pakistan, international affairs. You have to, because he died for us. No, his own ego and stupidity killed him. I didn't ask him to come here, said Walter with a dismissive wave of his hand. Do you have any idea how much tension he created between our two governments? How much damage he's done to our intelligence network? It took me 3 years to build this program, and he showed up here out of the blue and trashed it in 1 week. The shock of betrayal acted like a flame on a fuse. The anger simmering in his gut erupted into pure fury. John crossed the office in 2 steps, grabbed Walter's lapels and slammed him against the wall, eyes shooting sparks. Walter squirmed against John's rasping breath, his eyes protruding at the unexpected onslaught. Shoving one arm against Walter's throat, John pulled his other fist back, ready to smash the sniveling toad into pulp, until his terrified squeak made him stop. Instead, he flung Walter to the floor and loomed over him. You bastard! How dare you blame Harry? John spat in his face. His blood is on your hands. Harry wouldn't have even had to come here if you were competent. You knew he came to clean up the mess you and your bureaucrats created. You just don't have the guts to admit it. You're nothing but a jackass, and a cowardly one at that. Walter climbed to his feet, humiliated but trying to maintain his dignity. Forcing a smile, he straightened his tie as he walked back to his chair. Behind his desk he felt safer, more authoritative. You ought to be more careful about what you say. Oh, I will be. I intend to let people know how your incompetence has cost the life of the United States' best agent, and how our foreign policy carried out by you is a total failure. You and your entire staff are hypocrites. The American people deserve to know what's really happening here. Don't you dare threaten me. No one will believe you, and you won't accomplish anything, Walter snarled. Watch me. The stars blinked and shimmered above the city. The temperature had dropped, the heat of the past week swept away by a sudden front of more typical autumn weather. A cold wind swirled through the diplomatic compound. John's toes felt numb as he stumbled up the stairs. He stood for a moment on the veranda, devastated by hopelessness and betrayal. His belief in the work he loved, the shining vision of nuclear power for peace and prosperity, was shattered. In reality, his nuclear energy project had been nothing more than a smokescreen for violent, greedy men and governments who cared nothing for the people, and were only interested in their own power plays. Now he doubted his work, doubted his own competence, doubted everything he thought he knew. Staring into the darkness with the cold wind in his face, he had no idea where he should go or what he should do next. A shooting star flared briefly as it skimmed across the sky and then disappeared. He called out, desperate, as if the star were Harry passing over and he could not stop him. He gazed after it until tears blurred his vision, and he wept, grieving for Marion, for Harry, and for himself.